I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today we're continuing my series ranking the Elden Ring bosses via their regions, as we take a look at Liurnia of the Lakes. Last time we tackled Limgrave. If you're curious about that starting region's bosses, click the link in the description below. Every boss with an official health bar is eligible for this list, and I'm only focusing on the above ground Liurnia bosses. Ainsel River will be covered on a separate list, as it's going to be paired with Deeproot Depths and Shifa River to create an underground ranking. With all that being said, all 28 Liurnia of the Lakes Elden Ring bosses ranked. Let me know your favourites down below. At number 28, we have the Cemetery Shade found in the Black Knife Catacombs. We already covered the Cemetery Shade in our Limgrave video, and there I discussed why I felt its moveset was too oppressive for my tastes. You've got a paralyzing move that leaves you open to attacks or a grab, you've got teleporting out of the way of the player's swings after they take a hit, and you've got the brutal bleed build-up from their weapons that leaves the player in a very vulnerable position. Yet on their own, a Cemetery Shade is still a relative challenge despite their small health pool. But this specific shade decided to flank itself with a host of skeletons, and thus my least favourite fight in the game was born. The addition of the skeletons turns an already hectic battle into an absolute clusterfuck of pain. The skeletons are great at distracting the player, some fighting melee, some ranged with arrows, all ready to trip away at your health. Sure, you could try rushing the Shade due to its low HP pool, but that's a high-risk, high-reward strategy that often ended in defeat for me. And imagine what happens when the Cemetery Shade fires its paralysis shot while there are skeletons still alive. You become a free target. It's artificial difficulty of the worst kind, and the fact that this boss killed me more times than any other boss in Liurnia is an absolute joke. You get the Twin Sage Sorcerer Ashes for defeating this boss, whose mileage will vary, as one of their sorceries is pretty weak, with the other being absolutely brutal. If you want to roll the dice, this summon's for you, but not for me. Just come into this fight with some sort of AoE, save yourself the trauma. At number 27, we have the Royal Revenant found in the King's Realm Ruins. Without a doubt, my least favourite enemy to fight in Elden Ring, the Royal Revenants were an absolute pain for me to handle regardless of playthrough. They have a knack for warping around the arena, spitting out poison, and then launching into a never-ending combo of arm swings. Their mobility makes it hard to keep up with them, their hitboxes make them very hard to even approach from any side, and their damage output makes them very easy to die to if you get unlucky. Luckily, we're fighting this guy in an enclosed room with no other enemies around. Most of the other encounters in the game with this enemy are either ganks or in areas where they're set to ambush you, so at least this time you're controlling the flow of the fight. Yes, I am fully aware they are insanely weak to healing magic, to the point where the fight kinda becomes a joke, and one day I will run a build that uses those incantations. But who going in blind would have any idea that these guys were weak to a spot of healing? They're probably the only enemy/boss in Elden Ring that I still fear outright, because even at an endgame level, I can't fight these guys without using a ton of healing flasks. He guards the Frozen Needle Thrusting Sword, which can be extremely powerful on a dual-wielding or power stance build, though that's admittedly out of my knowledge range. At the end of the day, the Royal Revenant is this low because I'm still salty about past experiences, and I'm happily taking it out on him. Am I the drama? Maybe I'm the drama. At number 26, we have the Crystallian found in the Raya Lucaria Crystal Tunnel. As a concept, I think the Crystallians are a fascinating enemy type. They're made of hard crystal, which bolsters their defenses, so that most forms of attack barely scratch them. The only way to do proper damage is to either stagger and hit them with a critical, or bring in a weapon that does strike damage. The latter is what I did for this specific boss, and it made the fight an absolute joke. Which is a shame, because look at the design of this guy. I love the fluorescent blue tinged with the red capes they wear. His chakram weapon is one of the coolest looking in the game. Hell, his dungeon to reach him was brutal due to a series of hard-hitting enemies that made me work for my victory. But while I adore the Crystallians' looks and feel, their gameplay just has them being a footnote on my journey. Not even a cool Beyblade spin attack, a Soulsborne requirement, can save them from being destroyed near immediately. This boss drops the Smithing Stone Miner's Bell-Bearing 1, which allows the purchase of Smithing Stone 1s and 2s from the Twin Maiden husks. All the Smithing Stone bell bearings are important for upgrades, so this guy is definitely worth killing ASAP into your playthrough. I just wish these guys had a tougher moveset so that cracking their defenses wasn't as simple as guard counter until they stagger. At number 25, we have the Crystallian duo found at the end of the Academy Crystal Cave. Wielding a spear and a staff, these are the other two variants of the Crystallian boss that you can find in-game, and just like with the last entry, these strategies are the same. Guard counter, stagger, kill. Now, I'm not sure if this is how the fight is meant to go, but for some reason, the spear wielder was the only one attacking me for the first half of the fight. The staff wielder just kept hopping and spinning around in the background, never using its spells to back up its friend. It was honestly comical how little these creatures cared for each other. The spear wielder can use its spear thrust move up to 5 or 6 times to catch the player off guard, so for every guard counter you make, you'll likely be taking damage from the next spear attack regardless. Your stamina will give out, but the boss is still easily staggerable regardless. The magic variant is slightly more challenging as you can't counter its magic like the spear, so you've got to use jump attacks and charged heavies to break its defenses and claim victory. Do so and you'll obtain the Crystal Release sorcery for your troubles, as well as an elevator leading to the Terra Magica sorcery, which is a zone-based buff to your magic, perfect for an intelligence build. The rewards, at least to me, are slightly more interesting than the prior Crystallian, and being a pair, they feel a tad more dynamic, which is why they rank higher on today's list. At number 24, we have Bol's Carrion Knight. I'll be honest, I'm likely lowballing this boss in the ranking, as I totally see why he could rank higher than the slew of repeat bosses we're about to push through in our next menagerie of entries. But by god, I was so tired of the troll enemies by the time I fought him. Cuckoo's Everjail, I had no idea about the lore. I was hoping for like a giant chicken or something ridiculous to surprise me. Not the same enemy type we've dealt with for hours now, only this time he can use Carrion sorceries. His main specialty is the Great Blade Phalanx, which creates 3 blades that home in on the player once fired. It's also your reward for defeating this boss, which honestly is a pretty nice find if you're going for a sorcery build, or you want to dip your toes specifically into Carrion magic. But that doesn't change the fact that outside of this one move, this boss is exactly the same as the Stormhill trolls. He does more damage, sure, but that's not enough to make a fight feel unique. He's in an Everjail, for goodness sake. The Limgrave Everjails all had bosses that we'd likely encounter in those jails for the first time. With the Carrion Knight, it's the other way around. I do hope Everjails come back in the DLC, but I also hope that the fights are more unique and interesting as a result. It's amazing how Liurnia has the worst Everjail in the game, but also the best Everjail in the game, and we'll be getting there much later. At number 23, we have the Liurnia of the Lakes, Tibia Marina. The second of 4 found within the game. While I think this Tibia Marina is more interesting from a gameplay perspective, as it's a stronger variant of the one found in Limgrave, I can't help but feel it's the least memorable of the bunch. Perhaps it's because you find this skelly bro in a random patch of eastern Liurnia without much fanfare. There's no ruined village this time like in Limgrave to set the scene, just a bunch of graves that feel more generic in design. Perhaps it's because this boss isn't hard to find in the slightest when he warps, going from up a hill to water, and vice versa every time he flees. On the plus side, he summons harder skeletons to fight you, but once again his attacks are able to kill his allies, which makes his summons a bit useless in the grand scheme of things. I did find this one goofy for trying to row his boat along rocks to escape me, great strategy there. He drops these skeletal bandit ashes upon defeat, which are a fine early game summon. Skeleton spirit summons can respawn upon defeat as long as the enemy doesn't catch their soul in a melee attack, but that use drops off in the mid to late game where every enemy has crazy combos, crazy damage, or crazy AoEs. Overall, I prefer the Limgrave Tibia Mariner, as it ties directly into the introduction of Dee's questline and Gurranq. Here, this Tibia Mariner just feels far too randomly placed in the world for me to enjoy as much. The fact that it's a mariner and it wasn't placed in the actual lake portion of the giant lake zone is fucking hilarious. At number 22 and 21, we have the Knights Cavalries found at the Gatetown Bridge and Bellum Highway. Of all the Knights Cavalries in the game, I think the pair found in Liurnia are my least memorable. Like, I remember the Forbidden Land Cavalry for ambushing me in the fog. I remember the Dragon Barrow Cavalry for being a great early game XP farm. But tell me to remember anything about the Liurnia pair and I'll draw a blank. Especially as both of them have the exact same weapon, the Knight Rider Glaive, and both of them have the exact same amount of health, 2704 HP. They're lucky that I enjoy fighting this enemy type due to them being one of the few mounted enemies you can knock off your horse, so ultimately the only way to differentiate this pair are by their drops. So, at number 22 we have the Gatetown Bridge variant, who drops the Ice Spear Ash of War. This can infuse your armament with cold and grant you access to the Ice Spear skill, which would be perfect for an ice-based build if that's your fancy. At number 21, we have Bellum Highway's variant as it drops the Giant Hunt Ash of War, which is a giant upward thrust that's designed to damage gigantic foes, useful in a game like Elden Ring where everyone's bigger than you, and it also drops the Knight Rider Glaive, the signature weapon of these cavalry units, a worthwhile drop for any strength build that excels at horseback combat. I love a Knight's Cavalry, I just don't have a lot to say about this pair. At number 20, we have the Bell-Bearing Hunter found at the Church of Vows. The Bell-Bearing Hunter doesn't change much when it comes to his different appearances beyond his damage output, and here at the Church of Vows is when I feel he's at his easiest in the game. Because by this point, you've likely leveled up a ton. You've got a more finalized build, better weapons, better items, better stats, better buffs. Basically, you're more prepared to actually fight him. And this tracks, as I was able to defeat him here on my first go-around. The only trouble was actually spawning him. It took a little bit longer than I would have liked, as the game was being a little finicky. I still find Elmer an absolute blast to fight, but I wanted to place a higher focus on unique battles in this ranking series, so unless a repeat fight does something unique to make itself stand out, it'll always end up ranking lower than its first appearance. He gives the Meat Peddler's Bell Bearing upon defeat, allowing access to a series of items designed to craft various buffs for your character. I really love how Bell-Bearing Hunter's rewards are all based around making the crafting system more accessible, an aspect of Elden Ring that I didn't quite dabble in my first playthrough, but one that I'm sure will become more important as the years go by. Love his fight, just want to highlight other bosses in Liurnia more. At number 19, we have the Deathbird, found at the Scenic Isle. Gonna be honest, this is probably the most memorable of the 4 Deathbirds in the game, simply because this guy had the damage output to put me in my place constantly. I beat both Limgrave variants first try, I beat the Lanedell Deathbird first try. This Liurnia variant? It took me 4 attempts, and I honestly couldn't tell you why. It's the same moveset, the damage output was a little higher, and yet my strategy of guard countering the head wasn't working. I found myself on the back foot, struggling with my strategies as I tried to fight back, but it was refreshing. It's nice when there's at least one variant of a boss that actually challenges me, because at least I'll remember them. Now admittedly, the Deathbirds are completely overshadowed by their older cousins, the Deathrite Birds, who are just much cooler and crazier to fight. If I had to pick a singular Deathbird though who was my favourite, it would be this one. It drops the red feathered branch sword upon defeat, the opposite of the blue feathered branch sword from Limgrave, which boosts your attack power by 20% when under 20% HP. Very Zelda coded with the red and blue tunics focusing on attack and defense respectively. Deathbird, you may be a repeated boss, but every time you appear it does make me fear. And this specific variant is the one that bullied the Game Grumps when they skipped Stormvale Castle to go to Liurnia early, so it holds a fond place in my heart. At number 18, we have the Southwest Erdtree Avatar, found at the Minor Erdtree near the converted tower Site of Grace. This was the first avatar in the game that ever gave me trouble on my first playthrough. I have the fondest memories of running up that hill to try and defeat the boss, only to get my ass handed to me. You can tell I enjoy the fight because the crystal teardrops aren't even all that exciting. The cerulean crystal tear that recovers half of my FP bar, and a ruptured crystal tear which will make me explode when I drink it. No thanks. That being said, in my previous Erdtree avatar video from last week, I ranked this boss higher than the other Liurnia avatar in the northeast. But for this video, I'm switching that ranking around, because here I'm deciding to be objective for once. Love the avatar fights, love the moveset, love the magic, Asylum Demon on crack. At number 17, we have the Erdtree avatar of the northeast. Alright, I've been convinced. You are the superior Erdtree avatar in Liurnia. From your holy, lightning, and magic-shrouding cracked tears that temporarily boost those elements of attack which you drop upon defeat, to the way your arena honestly just looks cooler in the middle of the Mausoleum Woods, surrounded by ancestral followers that you have to slay to make the fight easier. The setup is just inherently better, even if subjectively I'm more biased towards the Southwest avatar. But I'm here to say that objectively, this is the better Liurnia avatar, and I will not be taking questions. In fact, we're going to move on, because I really have nothing else to say about this boss that I haven't already said in this video, the Limgrave video, and the video from the other week. At number 16, we have the Bloodhound Knight found in the Lakeside Crystal Cave. For anyone who followed Blythe's questline, meaning they had an easy time with Darrowil and Limgrave, this will likely be their first experience facing a Bloodhound Knight on their own. These guys are fast and lethal, able to do brutal bleed build-up with their attacks, and their aggression means if you're not confident in your strategy, you will be overwhelmed. However, I find them to be glass cannons, as once you're able to break their poise and turn the tides, you do a lot of damage in return. I love the arena this boss is fought in, this ancient crystal cavern. On my first playthrough, I actually got jump scared since you don't get warned by a boss fog when entering its lair. My strategy was to guard counter, as it's a surefire way to get yourself a free critical attack, but as you can see from my footage, I was close to proccing the bleed status multiple times. I allowed myself to take damage to get the result I wanted, a reckless play, befitting of my style. The boss drops the Cerulean Amber Medallion upon defeat, which boosts a player's maximum FP by 7% when equipped. Perfect for any build that relies on magic or weapon skills as their main form of attack, especially as you won't run into the +1 or +2 variants for quite some time. Defeating this boss also gains you access to Liurnia, a valuable NPC questline that will ultimately help you reach the Consecrated Snowfield and the Halig Tree. So, if you want to include that as a reward for beating this boss, you could bump him up a placement or two. At number 15, we have the Cleanrot Knight found in Stillwater Cave. Another cavern you'll find early on in Liurnia, this will likely be your first encounter with a Cleanrot Knight, and whether it leaves a positive impression on you or not will be down to your preferences. This early in the game, they're a real challenge, as you don't see them as regular enemies that often, with only a few scattered around the lands between outside of the Halig Tree itself. This boss is fought in an arena filled with poison, so making it a priority to reach dry land on the far side is a must if you want a chance against this foe. They wield the Cleanrot Spear, which is the less interesting of their two potential weapons. They can summon spears from the ground as they drag their weapon along the dirt, and most importantly, they have a brutal spear charge grab attack. If this hits, you will be immediately afflicted with Scarlet Rot. In the early game, you may as well give up and let the boss kill you. You won't have the items to heal the affliction, and whether you have Flame Cleanse Me is down to how well you explored Liurnia before tackling this cave. What's rough is that said grab has a tricky dodge timing that feels just a tad delayed. I don't think I ever got the hang of dodging it fully, even late into my playthrough, just a combination of panic rolls and good luck. The boss drops the Winged Sword insignia upon defeat, which increases the attack power of successive attacks made by the player from 3% to 5% to 10%. This boss also has this effect itself during the fight, making this a rare instance where the boss is actually utilizing their talisman drop to defeat the player. While I'm not a fan of the poison-filled arena or the looming threat of Scarlet Rot, The fun moveset of the boss and the insanely cool design completely makes up for it. Unlike the looming threat of me explaining we're trying to reach 35,000 subscribers by the end of the year. If after finishing the video you enjoy what you see, consider parrying that subscribe button, or go the extra mile and become a channel member, getting you early access to future videos, plus shoutouts in the description and at the end of the video. On with the list. At number 14, we have the Onyx Lord found in the Royal Grave Evergaol. Said to be given life from meteors that struck long ago, the Onyx Lord wields a curved sword and has the power to repel the player with their gravity magic. This specific Onyx Lord, while not the most exciting fight in the grand scheme of things, has one special reason that boosts him this high on the list, because honestly the fight is pretty forgettable. That is, until he reaches his enraged state and uses his prime sorcery, Meteorite. He slams his sword into the ground and with a powerful blast summons a series of meteorites to home in on the player. If you don't know this attack is coming, it can be absolutely devastating, though experienced players can dodge through it relatively easily. I just love the idea of this unassuming gravity magic boy suddenly launching meteors at the player like it was nothing. It's entertaining and made even more fun when you defeat the boss and you're immediately gifted with the meteorite sorcery yourself. This powerful ability allows the player to use the same spell, and given Elden Ring's ability to charge certain spells or use certain spells until your FP runs out, Meteorite's on that list. Get under a large boss, slam that staff into the ground, and watch the meteorites demolish health bars. The Onyx Lord may not do much himself, but his drop is too valuable a sorcery to ignore and earns him an upper half placement on today's list. At number 13, we have Glintstone Dragon Smaragd, found to the west of Rhea Lucaria. While not a required boss fight, Smaragd does guard a required item if you want to enter the academy, its Glintstone Key. You'd think Smaragd would be a big step up compared to Flying Dragon Aaviier due to the glintstone aspect of its design, more sorceries and more magic, but for the most part the fights are the same. Its Fire Breath does a magic damage now if it connects, but has the same patterns as Aaviier, so if you know how to avoid one attack, you can avoid them all. The only danger is the new Glintstone Comet, which is a ranged, fast-moving projectile that can be dodged by riding on Torrent. Staying close to this boss means it'll be less likely to use the attack as he tends to use it at range, so most people may not even experience its small, expanded move. I do think Smaragd is a good turning point in Elden Ring though. I'm in the minority in that I really like the dragon fights, but Smaragd is let down by the existence of Adula later in the game. Adula is also a Glintstone dragon, but has extra Carian magic on top of the regular Glintstone moveset to make it stand out. Smaragd being an early taste of what's to come later with Adula is a fun element of progression, but it does mean Smaragd was always going to get ranked a lot lower due to said comparison. He drops a dragon heart upon defeat like all the dragons, and you can unlock the Smaragd's Glintstone Breath attack at the Dragon Communion Cathedral in Caelid. If you're doing a dragon build, it is a welcome drop. At number 12, we have the Erdtree Burial Watchdog found in the depths of the Cliff Bottom Catacombs. Like most of the bosses in Liurnia, this watchdog wields glintstone magic via the Watchdog's Staff. This moveset isn't much different from the Greatsword, except you'll be dealing with magic-aspected damage instead. The boss has 3 heads, meaning its flamethrower attack has the maximum range, but the flames aren't tinged with any magic damage, it's pure fire. The boss can summon a circle of small magic projectiles, which will slowly home in on the player too, easily avoided. Honestly, I like this fight because while it's not too different from the regular Watchdog, the magic aspect feels fresh and fitting with the region we're in, and there are no extra mobs or enemies to ramp up the difficulty in an unflattering way. The boss drops the Kaiden Sellsword Ashes, which is a high DPS spirit ash that works best when you're there to back him up. If he's attacking solo, his health melts relatively quickly. There are other Spirit Ashes that do the same job but better, still a good find though. Can't wait for Shadow of the Erdtree where we get a sleep-aspected Watchdog to fight, am I right gamers? I'm calling it now! At number 11, we have Adan, Thief of Fire, found in the Malefactor's Evergaol. This goofy little man seems like a pretty weak creature, small in stature, with naught but a close-range flail to protect himself. Adan's flame attacks are deceptively dangerous. Flame of the Fell God is a giant orb of fire that travels towards the player before exploding in a ground AoE. If you're far away, you've got no reason to worry, but if he casts it from up close, you might get clipped by the blast. His other danger is his catch flame, which hits you right in the face with a fire blast that will do significant HP damage. On top of that, while he's easy to underestimate due to his small stature, if he lands a hit on you, expect it to hurt. His flail is painful and can even two-shot a low-level player, as this Everjail is very easy to access before you've sufficiently leveled up. His attacks are easy to bait and easy to take advantage of, but one false move and making fun of him turns into him making fun of you. He drops the Flame of the Fell God incantation upon his defeat, allowing you to claim his signature fire attack for yourself. Great for crowds of enemies, entertaining to use, but requiring a heavy 41 faith to cast. I'll leave it up to you whether that's a worthwhile trade-off. At number 10, we have the Deathrite bird found at the Academy Gate Town. The first Deathrite bird you'll come across in the game, these upgraded variants of the regular Deathbirds are a far deadlier, far more brutal foe. With over 6,000 HP, my game plan was to come back to the Deathrite bird later in the game after I'd completed Lanedell, to ensure I had the damage to overcome him. For me, the Deathrite birds are tough because of their magic. They utilize ghost flames throughout their moveset, from hot poker sweeps, to raising their wings and blasting ghost flames towards you in a homing pattern, to slamming their poker down causing an AoE explosion that knocks you back. All of this on top of some relatively fast pecks and swipes. But for me, this Deathrite bird was the easiest of the bunch. There are 4 in the game, and the other 3 are all placed in tough-to-handle locations, whereas the Academy Gate Town Deathrite bird is just vibing. It drops the Ancient Death Rancor upon defeat, a death sorcery that allows you to summon dark spirits that will chase down your foes. It looks incredibly cool, and I can definitely see myself building a Ghost Flame mage down the line, but as with most homing sorceries, they tend to fizzle out once you hit the late game. A solid boss, but I'll have far more to say about its later incarnations. At number 9, we have the Spirit Caller Snail found in the Road's End Catacombs. Now, I'll ask that you ignore my footage of this fight while listening to this entry, as I went into this battle fully knowing the gimmick and understanding the assignment. Spirit Caller Snails appear a few times in Elden Ring, spawning other enemies for you to fight while hiding their existence. In this case, the Spirit Caller Snail can summon 2 Crucible Knights to face you, spirits who have fallen in battle, and most players will think to attack them, perhaps killing them reveals the boss, but instead it's a Witches of Hemwick situation. The snail can be found along the sides of the arena, illuminated by a faint white glow that, once you've seen, you won't be able to ignore. So the actual challenge is to avoid the Crucible Knight ahead of you, and instead go for the snail, following it as it teleports until you cut its health to 0. There are many people who dislike this fight, and I fully understand their reasoning, but I wanted to applaud FromSoft for trying a different gimmick to what they usually do here. I didn't think the Witches of Hemwick would come back as snails, but I'm not mad at it. I just wish the snail itself had some form of extra defense to give it a bit of challenge after you've figured the gimmick out. It drops the Glintstone Sorcerer Ashes upon its defeat, which is one of the worst sorcery spirit ashes in the game. Only 1 spell at its disposal, flimsy health, there's no point in using this ash when you've got so many better solo spirit summons, most of which you'll have found in Limgrave. It makes the Spirit Caller Snail a boss that you have no real reason to chase down in future playthroughs, but I still can't deny I enjoy the concept. At number 8, we have the Black Knife Assassin found in the Black Knife Catacombs. While in Limgrave we faced a Black Knife Assassin who was weakened and half dead, here in the Black Knife Catacombs we face a fully loaded assassin who is ready to destroy the player. This is an optional fight that can be found by riding a guillotine in the dungeon, but is required if you want to progress the quest line of Sorcerer Roger. The arena is a small church hall which doesn't give a ton of movement space, which arguably makes the assassin a bigger threat. You can't really run away, you have to block her attacks, find her openings, and never turn your back to her. Being a fully powered assassin means after a certain point, she begins using the power of the Rune of Death to create red flame projectiles which will drain your health when hit. This status effect is what makes the Black Knife assassins particularly dangerous and forces you to treat every encounter with care to survive. Aside from that, her moveset is the same as her prior counterpart. Luckily, she's not invisible like a future boss will be ranking in the Altus Plateau video. She drops the Black Knife print for the player, which is a key item Roger needs to discover who orchestrated the Night of the Black Knives. She also drops the assassin's Cerulean Dagger, which allows you to restore FP while dealing critical hits. I'm sure it has its uses, not a talisman I'm drawn to, but to each their own. I like this fight for its unique arena, its optional nature, and its ties to Roger and Fia's questline. At number 7, we have the Omen Killer, found at the village of the Albinaurics. Like the Erdtree avatars, the Omen Killer's moveset and boss fight is based on a creature from a past Soulsborne game, that being the Capra Demon from Dark Souls 1. Both fights feature a humanoid creature that wields 2 large blades. They share many attacks, including the signature leap forwards, bringing their weapons down upon their opponents, and most importantly, both fights feature extremely annoying dogs that get in the way to the point of frustration. Omen Killer, you are lucky I'm nostalgic for Trauma. I actually found this boss quite entertaining, despite being the Capra Demon's moveset. The Omen Killer is much faster, does more damage, and ends up being more threatening as a result. The dogs are still annoying, but this time it's the boss who's doing most of the damage. I love his arena right in the center of town, amidst the corpses of all the Albinaurics that were slain by his hand. It paints a morbid picture that you luckily get to rectify. He drops the Crucible Knot Talisman, which eliminates headshot bonus damage and stagger for the player. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I do not recall any instances of headshots in Elden Ring. I don't know what this talisman is used for, I don't know what builds it would work in, I don't know. It feels very niche, so thank God the Omen Killer is a fun fight because that drop is not selling any timeshares. At number 6, we have Magma Worm Makar, the boss of the Ruin-strewn Precipice, and easily my favourite of the Magma Worm bosses. Makar has a very important role, guarding the second entrance to the Altus Plateau, as defeating him will allow the player to take an alternate elevator, skipping the Grand Lift of Dectus. His battle has 2 distinct phases, the first half, where he'll charge towards you on all 4s with traditional dragon attacks, tail swipes, bites, a few magma puddles because of that heartburn it's got going on. Take an Almax, Makar, it'll fix you right up. The second half, the boss stands on his hind legs, alights his sword with flames, and begins fighting you more like a humanoid enemy would, with tough curved sword slams that you have to dodge and block through to survive. Makar's boss fight tells a story. The first half, a creature born of instinct. The second half, the former humanity of the magma worms seeping back in, as they're all born of those who partook in Dragon Communion only to lose themselves to their instincts. Fascinating lore. It's so similar to the Gaping Dragon, my guilty pleasure Dark Souls 1 fight, that I can't help but cheer Makar on. Plus, having him placed where he is will likely make him feel very unique due to the large, expansive arena that seems designed with his fight in mind. He drops his curved Magma Worm Scale Sword upon his defeat, and while I'm not sure if it's a good weapon or not, I know that it looks super cool, and having more weapon options is never a bad thing. It's a shame that Makar doesn't unlock any spells at the Dragon Communion though. The Mount Gelmir Magma Worm and Theodorix hold that honour. But as a fight, Makar is my favourite of the bunch, and I will die on that hill. At number 5, we have Glintstone Dragonadula, the Guardian of the Three Sisters. You can choose to fight her when you first encounter her, but she'll eventually fly away, her true battle taking place at the Cathedral of Manus Celes at the top of the Moonlight Altar. Here she appears to defend Ranni, and whether this is a test to see if you're worthy to become Ranni's Elden Lord, or she's just acting under orders to defend her mistress, you have to take her down. Of all the field dragons in Elden Ring, Adula is the best of the bunch. She's got the same moveset as Smaragd, with 2 extra moves that really expand her abilities. The first is a Crystal Shard attack, where she'll create a Crystal Shard in her mouth, which she then shatters to send them homing towards the player. I've had this attack decimate Torrent a few times, but like every other homing attack, consistent movement or hiding behind something works wonders. Her signature move is Adula's Moonblade, where she flies up into the air, conjures a giant Moonblade greatsword, then swoops down, swirling in a circle while slicing the blade, creating frost projectiles as she does so. It is one of the coolest moves in the game, beautifully animated, and feels so good to dodge through, but is also another move that will decimate Torrent. I just think the combination of Adula being an important character in Ranni's questline, the beauty of the arena in which you face her being the hidden tip of Liurnia beneath the full moon, it gets me, man. It's not everyone's cup of tea, I respect that, but for me, it's more than enough. You get Adula's Moonblade as a sorcery upon winning the fight, a worthwhile reward that allows you to create a cold greatsword that can launch repeatedly with blade-like frost projectiles. All around a solid option for any player. Combined with the Moonlight Greatsword you get for beating Ranni's questline, I mean, you can become a real powerhouse. At number 4, we have the Red Wolf of Radagon, found in the Academy of Rhea Lucaria. I think the Red Wolf is one of the more interesting boss fights in the game, as taking it on early game when you're supposed to has this effect where both you and the wolf are glass cannons. You can dish out damage, but neither party has the HP to have this fight last particularly long. His claw swipes and bite attack strings can be tough to handle, as I've had multiple instances where he's managed to overwhelm me and drain my stamina. But it's his magic that's the real challenge. He uses a lot of Glintblade sorceries which are cast, and then shortly after, home in on the player. Dodging these should be simple, but the boss will often combo them with his melee attacks, creating tough to read setups. In the official boss form, this is all well and good, you can deal back the damage you take. I only have issue with the various red wolves they throw in the rest of the open world, like the one near the Onyx Lord Everjail, or the one in Nokron, where they're often accompanied by smaller wolves. Red Wolf is one of the best designed magic fights in the game, dare I say one of the best in Soulsborne, because we have a boss that doesn't solely rely on magic, striking a great melee magic balance that feels great to overcome. Unless you fight him too late into the game, in which case he's a cakewalk. If only his fight wasn't reused, I honestly think I'd rank him a spot higher, but those other instances fighting him really sour the uniqueness of the first encounter, enough to actually keep him out of my top 3. At number 3, we have Royal Knight Loretta, found at the Moongazing Grounds in Caria Manor. Loretta is a boss that I feel is severely underrated and sadly quite forgettable due to her similarities to other bosses like the Tree Sentinels and their draconic variants. It doesn't help that she also shares their battle theme, which is just a tragedy. Loretta is fought on horseback, but instead of the melee-focused moveset of the Tree Sentinel, she focuses on magic. Alongside the usual stabs, thrusts, and leap attacks, she can use the Glintblade Phalanx spell to always have a series of Glintblades at the ready when approaching the player. She can raise the pommel of her staff like a rifle and fire small glintstone projectiles at the player, which are just slow enough to catch me off guard because it throws my rhythm off. Then at half health, her attacks get stronger, and she can use her Loretta's Great Bow sorcery, which was a staple of my first playthrough. A great element of story, as the Albinaurics are known for their archery skills, and Loretta always favoured the Great Bow. The arrow also explodes on impact, so there's an extra element to worry about as you dodge it. But on the plus side, you get the Loretta's Great Bow spell for yourself if you defeat her, which is a great hard-hitting long-ranged projectile. Me versus Prospector Miriam at the Carian study hall on my first playthrough, Great Bow versus Great Bow, funniest thing you've ever seen. She also drops the Loretta's Slash, Ash of War, a polearm twin blade skill that allows you to imbue your weapon with magic, rise upwards with one slash, then downwards with another. It's a bit awkward to land as the player, but Loretta sure makes great use of it herself when you rematch her at the Hailing Tree. I just hope more people put some respect on Loretta's name. She's a great fight and well worthy of a top 3 spot on today's list. At number 2, we have Alecto, Black Knife Ringleader, found in the Ringleader's Everjail. I've gone on record stating that, for me, Alecto is the best Everjail fight in Elden Ring, and is also the best Black Knife Assassin fight in Elden Ring. She's an absolute beast with a tragic bit of lore that makes slaying her pretty sad. Yes, she's the ringleader of the Black Knife Assassins, but her daughter Tish died protecting her on their escape from Lane Dell. She's a grieving mother, coping with the choices she made to slay Godwyn, and we come looking to challenge her. I suspect she wants to die, but won't give up so easily. She wields the full Black Knife Assassin moveset, only her Helm Splitter move is turned up to 11, as she wields the same move as Malekith the Black Blade. Bringing her blade to the floor, it bursts, creating a deadly AoE around her that does red flame damage that saps that player's health. You have to know when to approach and when to back off, while also making sure you're avoiding unwanted damage and keeping her on her toes. Alecto is tough. You likely won't kill her on your first visit to the Moonlight Altar. I had to work my way up to killing her until I'd finished Leyndell. She killed me that many times. And I loved it. It's fitting that she's one of the toughest fights in the game because she guards what I consider to be the most powerful spirit summon in the game, Black Knife Tiche, her daughter. Tiche is powerful for the simple fact that she is great at dodging everything, meaning she won't take a ton of damage while using her Destined Death Flames to sap away any boss's health bar quicker than you can say gracias. Defeating Alecto is one of the most satisfying moments in Elden Ring, and second in Liurnia, only to Mother herself. At number 1 we have Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon. One of the 7 Shard Bearers, Rennala sits atop her academy in a cycle of despair and rebirth, and is, in my opinion, the closest FromSoft has come to a perfect magic fight. Her phase 1 involves you slaying her school children, needing to find the few powering her shield so you can knock her to the floor, then wail on her until she recharges, rising back up into the air. As this happens, you have to avoid flying books, or my favourite, the dropping chandeliers that always killed my boyfriend on his playthrough. He just didn't have the observational awareness to keep track of them. So for anyone who says Rennala's phase 1 is easy, don't be so certain. It might be easy for you, but there are a ton of people out there who struggle with it. Her phase 2 is, of course, where the fight gets real. Rennala goes full Bayonetta, Ranni's Curse, taking us to one of the most beautiful locations we've been to in any Souls game. And it's here where Rennala bears the full brunt of her magic against us. Glintstone comets, pebbles, her full moon attack that she launches at you from the sky, and most famously, the Comet Azure Kamehameha. All the while twirling her staff like a cheerleader at the big game. And that's before she goes full Metal Alchemist and starts using summoning circles to bring dangerous foes to fight you. From wolves and a bloodhound knight to a large troll, all the way to an actual fucking dragon. This little element of RNG is what many players find frustrating about Rennala's fight, but I don't mind it. It gives us a little bit of spice. Of course she can summon a dragon, she's possibly the most powerful mage in the lands between, let her flex a bit. Rennala has style, she has substance, she's got fantastic and tragic lore, she just needed friends to tell her that Radagon was not the man for her. Get some salted caramel, Ben & Jerry's, and hash it out while watching awful TV. Instead, she became our de facto character to reset our stats. Thanks Rennala, best boss of Liurnia, and you provide a great service. Shame about your mental health, but what can you do in Elden Ring? And that's my list. Which Liurnia of the Lakes boss is your favourite? Let me know down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my future videos. My social medias are on screen now, feel free to follow where you feel comfortable. I recommend my Twitter, it's the best place to follow me, or just check out my community tab here on the YouTube channel, that works too. A massive shout out to all of my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. You guys are amazing, thank you so much. You guys are keeping this channel alive, you're very kind, and I will see you next time for another Elden Ring boss ranking. Adios!